Good evening, everyone. Welcome. If you're a Sigma Delta Theta, please stand up. The sorority sisters of Val Demings. If you're going to vote in the 2024 election, please stand up. No, I'm just kidding. So, let me tell you how this night began. A couple of months ago, I'm at a dinner, at a table not too different from this, and I'm seated in the middle of Michael Steele, Representative Demings, and I thought, if we could bottle this up, we could sell tickets, and people will come to hear the two of you. Hence, here we are tonight. So thank you very much for being with us. We're going to talk politics, but if you're at a dinner conversation, you want to know more about the people who you're having dinner with. So, Michael, you lost your mom just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
You have a compelling story, and Val Demings, you have told me your compelling story. So let's begin on a personal note. Val, we'll start with you. And welcome to Erie.
Well, let me say good evening to all of you, and it is my absolute honor and privilege and pleasure to join you here in Erie, Pennsylvania. Your hospitality has been wonderful. I was born and raised in Florida. Yes, I said that. I was born and raised in Florida. I've never lived anyplace else. I am the youngest of 7 children. My mother was a maid, and my father a janitor. I remember my dad used to go to work 7 days a week. Not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He wasn't on the 40-hour work week plan. He used to go to work 7 days a week, doing whatever odd job he could to make ends meet for our family. My mother used to do what they call days work. She used to clean a different house every day for a different family. Neither of my parents finished high school, but they truly had a dream that their 7 little children would do more, be more, and have more. My parents used to talk about a dream that was deeply rooted in the American dream. That's why it's so important for me, Michael, to have this conversation tonight and talk about really what the American dream still means, and talk about that the American dream is still very much alive if we're willing to work hard for it. I can remember being told I wasn't the right color, the right gender. I probably wouldn't amount to much. I didn't have anything growing up. But my mother used to say, no, no, no. You can be whatever you want to be or do whatever you want to do if you're willing to work hard for it and play by the rules. Youngest of 7, but the first in my family to go to college. I went to Florida State University, and after college, went to work as a social worker. From there, went to work at the Orlando Police Department, had the awesome honor of working my way up through the ranks to become the chief of police, and then serving 3 terms in the United States House of Representatives. I just happen to believe that only in America is my story possible. And we're on a mission to make sure that every man, every woman, every boy, and every girl, regardless of who they are, the color of their skin, where they live, how much money they may have, just like I used to be, will have an opportunity to succeed in a country that we believe is the greatest country in the world. So I'm honored to be here with you tonight, and thank you so much for allowing me to share my personal story.
And if I may add, the very, 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 very short list for Vice President of the United States, and the best is yet to come. Michael, as somebody who wholeheartedly supports and endorses adoption, you have a personal story that you may not have shared with the Erie audience. This is now your 17th visit back to Erie, so thank you.
Right?
Welcome back.
I spent a lot of time in Erie, can't you tell? It's great to be back. I love what you've done with the place. It's been wonderful, and I love the people in this part of Pennsylvania. I have a very special connection to Pennsylvania. So a little bit of my backstory is I'm an adopted child. And my mom, who passed back in September at 96 years old, told me the story when I was a teenager, because I didn't know for a long time that I was adopted, because I'm sure folks in the audience, particularly of a certain age, know you just didn't talk about those things in polite company. And so I found out, as nosy kids do, that I was an adopted child. And so I went to my mother and I asked her, I said, so what's up with the adoption thing? Is that true? And so she sat me down and she said, yes. She said, so let me tell you how it happened. She said, when she was a young woman, she and her husband, my adopted father, couldn't have children. And so she decided that she would adopt. She had recently converted to the Catholic Church and had become familiar with St. Anne's Infant Home, which it was called at the time. Today is St. Anne's Center for Children, Youth, and Families. And so she said she and her husband went to St. Anne's, and they were, back in the day, in the 50s, they had these rooms that were like from wall to wall, cradles and cribs that had children in them. And parents-to-be would come in, and they walk up and down the aisle, right, to inspect the children, what have you. So she said as she started to walk down the aisle, as she approached my particular crib, and I was probably about 7 or 8 months old, she said, I stood up. And as she got closer to the crib, she said, I reached out to her.
Shocking.
And she looked at, right? She looked at the sister, the nun, and she looked at me, and she went over and she picked me up and she turned to the nun and said, this is my son. And that's how that journey began, many, many, many years ago. And subsequently raised in Washington, D.C., and grew up there in Catholic elementary school, went to Catholic high school, Archbishop Carroll High School, which was run by the Augustinians. Why is that important? Because after I graduated from Johns Hopkins, I entered the Augustinian order and was stationed at Villanova for about a year, taught at Malvern Prep, before going on to Lawrence, Massachusetts for my novitiate. And during my novitiate, my time in novitiate, I left. And the funny part, before I get to that, the funny part was, so mom, as I said, was a convert to Catholicism. She grew up in the Church of God in Christ. And if anyone's familiar with the Kojic tradition, you know that it is a profoundly, deeply rooted tradition. So I go to my mom, and after I graduated my senior year at Hopkins, and I told her, I said, well, I've decided to become a priest. And the first question, not even a question, my mama said, so you can have grandkids, right? And I went, different tradition, Mom, different tradition. No, I can't. And she never said anything else after that. She was like, quiet. I was like, oh, okay. So I did my 3 years, and then when I called her up to tell her that I was leaving the order and to come home, she went, oh, baby, that's just wonderful. When you getting here? So that's Mom, But it was, but that story. Just a final point on that was, very much like Val. My mom and my dad, and my adoptive dad died when I was 4. So for a very extended period of time, it was just me and my mom. And then she remarried and then adopted my sister Monica. And very much like out of your family tradition, there was enormous faith in the value of her children. And a lot of that faith was utilized through their hard work to make sure that we would have. So my sister Monica went on to UVA, went to Georgetown Med School, became a doctor, married Mike Tyson. So Mom did well, I think. But Yeah, a lot of people don't know that about my sister, but yes. Mike Tyson's my brother-in-law, my former brother-in-law. Yes, Thanksgiving was very interesting.
I've never asked you the question about how the priesthood or the seminary trained you for politics, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, it did. It actually did, yeah.
So let's get right to it. And we'll talk about the budget stuff and Donald Trump and all of that, but I want to talk big picture. So Val Demings, the state of our politics. There's too much money in politics. The media is fractured and siloed. People go to media places that reinforce their own point of view. Congressional districts are gerrymandered, so there's no incentive to cross the political aisle. All of this collectively has really affected American politics today.
Steve, there's no doubt about that. And let me just say this. When I was recruited, I had announced my retirement from the Orlando Police Department as chief, and I was immediately recruited by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee to run for Congress, and I didn't want to do that initially. I thought that was kind of a crazy idea. I remember saying, I'm not a politician. I kind of say what I mean and mean what I say. I'm not sure that would work for me, but ultimately decided to run because I wanted to continue to make my community, my state, my nation a better place. And so I went to Congress. And then let me go back. When I was a police chief, I could not tell you the political party of the overwhelming majority of people that I worked with. We had a mission that was to reduce the crime rate and keep people safe, and we were laser focused on that mission. I took that same spirit and attitude to the United States House of Representatives, just there, let's get something done on behalf of the American people, because certainly as a police chief, you're results driven. And Steve, I was so disappointed that what I found were there were way too many people who had been elected to Congress who had no interest in governing. They were there for the wrong reasons. They were able to get there because of the money, the dark money in politics. You know, whoever gave me a donation, if it was a very minuscule amount, I had to identify who they were and where they worked and all of that. But we know dark money in politics, unfortunately, plays a bad role. Gerrymandering, the matter of fact, the district that I won in 2016 was a result of a lawsuit that was filed by a couple of groups in Florida because the district had been so badly gerrymandered. And so that's an issue in politics. But with all of that, the things that you listed, there are just people there who have no interest in governing. They're there to disrupt, they're there to obstruct, they're there for television interviews and how many social media likes that you can get. And I think we have seen painfully the result of that all of this year, matter of fact, looking at what's going on in Congress.
And Michael, there's a famous quote by Sam Rayburn that said, basically, any jackass can burn down the barn. It takes a carpenter to build one. So who are the jackasses in Congress?
Let me write these names down.
You can, all of them. All of them. I look, folks, you could probably tell why they loved me inside the RNC. I've never played well with others in politics because I didn't grow up in the system the way a lot of my fellow Republicans did. I was not a college Republican or a teenage Republican. I was a Republican from Washington, D.C., or a Republican from Prince George's County, Maryland. So my orientation in politics has always been much more broad and in terms of my perspective. So going back to the point about my time in the seminary, my seminary experience informed my leadership. It informed my approach to governing as lieutenant governor. It informed my approach to politics as a party leader and official. And at the center of that is the teaching of my faith around the dignity and humanity of every individual. So no matter what I think of your politics, I still see Steve. I still see Val. Val is much more than a Democrat to me. all right? And so what that informs me then is, okay, her politics may be Democratic, but behind that politics is a professional woman who has a career, who has a family, who has a life, who does things. So how does all that connect? Because all of that drives policy, right? All of that informs the individual's role and responsibility when it comes to policy making. And to Val, to your point about what drives those members of Congress today, it is about the ticks and the likes. It is about something other than public service. They're not public servants anymore. And I think that falls on us as citizens because we elect them. We elect them. And every year, every 2 years, you hear it. People are like, oh my God, Congress sucks. And you're thinking, this is going to be a wholesale change. You're going to wipe out half the Congress and put in all new people. 98% of them show back up because you put them there. So that responsibility at the end of the day, from my perspective, ultimately falls on us. So when you're looking at the tribalism, when you're looking at the lack of attention paid to 90% issues for the American people, whether it is on guns, whether it's on abortion, whether it's on other social or cultural issues, when your elected officials stop listening to you, it's time for you to take action and do something about that. You don't get to complain anymore about their behavior when you condone it with your vote. And that's exactly where we find ourselves today, which is why the Congress looks and sounds the way it does.
I bet you missed Congress this year with all of the three week without a speaker. Let me ask you about Nancy Pelosi, because Don Bacon, Republican conservative from Nebraska, Dusty Johnson, conservative Republican from South Dakota, said to me, our party needs a Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
What was it about her leadership in the House that was able to manage and get things done that so far the men have not been able to do?
Well, now, I'm not going to go and say the men have not been able to do, but you're right, the men have not been able to do.
It's true.
Look, you know, I'll go back to when I was trying to be convinced to run. And I talked to a lot of different people. And Nancy Pelosi was one of those people. And I was really, when I went up to D.C. to talk to leadership, I had no interest. I only went up to D.C. to talk to the leadership because my mayor said, well, you need to go do that. You don't want to burn any bridges. You never know who you'll need.
Note, always listen to the mayors.
Always listen to the mayors.
Right, Joyce?
My husband is a mayor. But Nancy Pelosi, and I'm sitting there in her office, my husband and me, and she said, well, you know, why don't you want to run? And I said, I'm just not sure that's for me. I'm a police chief. I'm a little rough around the edges. I don't know. And she said, you're a public servant. She said, you've dedicated your life to public service. And she said, 1 in 6 children go to bed hungry every night in a nation that we say is the greatest nation in the world. If you could do something about that, wouldn't you? And when my husband and I walked out of the office, he looked in my eyes and he says, you're gonna do it, aren't you? I said, yeah, I'm gonna do it. She did not focus on big things up here. She focused on the most vulnerable constituency in America, and that's children who go to bed hungry every night. She is a public servant who is mission-focused and mission-driven. And she has the amazing ability to bring a diverse, because as you all know, the Democratic Party is the big tent, right? You have a little bit of everybody who's there. But she has an amazing ability to bring people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, from different parts of the country together and find that common denominator. If we're trying to improve the quality of life for people in America, what does everybody need? Well, children need a good education. What does everybody need? Workers need a wage, a livable wage that's truly livable. She knows how to find that common ground. And she's not threatened by those who might stand up in a caucus meeting and challenge what she's saying, because she's focused on the goal. Like John Lewis said, keep your eyes on the prize. So she's not affected or impacted by personalities now. But she does not play. Don't go get me. She is a leader.
Don't fool with mother.
Don't fool with mother. She leads from the front and not from the rear. She clearly understands it is not a personality contest. And she was able, she will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest speaker of our lifetime.
We need to get her to come to Erie.
Can I? So, having danced with Nancy, I think it's important to understand what Val's saying in the context of her origin story. People think Nancy Pelosi, and this is what I tried to tell Republicans all the time, is, some left coast, San Francisco, lightheaded. Nah, this woman's from Baltimore.
That's right.
She's from B-more. Her daddy was the mayor, a very powerful mayor of the city of Baltimore at a time when being a powerful mayor mattered. His name runs up there with, the likes of Chicago and elsewhere, Daley's. D'Alessandro is a powerful name to this day in the city of Baltimore. So you have to understand her origin story when you go to tango with Nancy Pelosi. She is fearless. I had the pleasure of dealing with her and getting to know with her in the 2010 cycle. As I like to put it, I won the battle. I fired Nancy Pelosi, but she won the war, because not only is Obamacare the law of the land to this day that Republicans cannot repeal and replace, but she then went back, got a second bite of the apple, and beat us again with her ability and her leadership. So I have mad respect for Nancy Pelosi as a political opponent, but most especially as a person with whom I've gotten to know. We always have great laughs when we're together. I call her Madam Speaker. She calls me Michael. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship. And I just do. I respect, honestly and truly respect her political prowess. So my conservative colleagues on my side of the aisle recognizing that about her, saying we need a Nancy Pelosi. Trust me, if we had that Nancy Pelosi, we would not have gone through 5 speakers of the House on the Republican side. Trust me.
And Steve, if I could just, because Michael, you brought up the Affordable Care Act, and I wasn't in Congress yet during that time, but I've heard the stories that, it was tough. It was a tough period of time, and there were, I believe, 60 Democrats who lost their seats.
63.
Thank you.
Yes.
63 Democrats who lost their seats because of their vote on the Affordable Care Act. Now, they didn't go into that blindly. They knew that there was a strong possibility that they would lose their seats. But because of the leadership of Speaker Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi at the time, and believing in something bigger and better and greater than yourselves, that every person living in this country should have access to health care, for her to be able to bring her caucus together and have every person in that caucus vote for the Affordable Care Act, knowing that they could lose their seats, that's leadership.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So, Val, do you feel the warmth, do you feel the love of the Erie community? You're among friends.
Among friends.
So a personal
This
question.
sounds like a setup, though. What are you getting ready to? Okay.
What is it like to be vetted for VP?
Vetted for VP. That was an amazing experience, Steve. I was in Florida minding my own business.
And the phone rings.
And the phone rings, right? And, we kind of went through the, would you be interested in, And I'm like looking at my husband going, and I said, well, okay, what does it involve? You know, let me talk to my family, because you got to say that. You can't be too anxious, right? And so I did, and then there was another call, and they said, well, we want to move forward. And number one, remember my personal story that I shared with you. Isn't that what the American dream truly is about, that this little black girl who grew up poor in the South could actually be vetted for a vice president of the United States? The questions that they asked, we had hour-long interviews, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Myself, they wanted to know every place I'd lived. They wanted me to talk about everything I could remember, my very first memories as a child, and go through that. They also did the same thing for my husband and my sons. My brother, one of my brothers, he was 67 years old at the time, and when he had his interview with them, they started, when you were 20 years old in the Air Force, he said, this is gonna be a long interview. They asked about my faith, my pastor. They asked about my pastor's sermons. I wonder where they got that one from. They listened to, and you know, as a police chief, certainly, and I used to be the public information officer for the police department, they listened to every interview that they could find that I had ever done on television, radio, every speech. It was, you talk about an invasion of our privacy. But it was absolutely such an honor to be considered. And I can remember protesting at times, because I was a police chief. It seemed like it was getting a little too personal. And I remember one person on the team saying, but Val, you're being vetted for vice president of the United States. I'm like, okay, all right, okay. But it was a great honor. It was a great experience, and I was honored to do it, and honored that the president would consider me for such a special position during such a critical time. It was right after George Floyd, the tragedy with George Floyd, so it was a tough time for our nation, but I was honored. Thank you.
Michael?
I've never been vetted for vice president. I couldn't fill out the paperwork. It would be just too much. Now, look, I watched this whole thing unfold with Val and Kamala, and I had not at that point really gotten to know the Congresswoman. I knew of her, but I had not known her personally. I was just blown away by the resume, to be honest, and thought that. It would be a very tough decision for his team, looking at the number of choices he had, but the backgrounds and the storylines and the narratives. And if you know anything about the vice president, then vice president, now President Biden, he would be very careful about that. It was very important and personal to him, which is something that, again, I grew up in Washington, D.C., so guys like Joe Biden were, folks I would see all the time, and we would run into, and particularly if they were very accessible to the public, a lot of these big political figures were individuals that you would see in very relaxed settings, and you would get to know over the years, and you get to learn a little bit about them. And the one thing that's always struck me about Joe is that he really did have that sort of down-to-earth, everyday kind of common sense, feel, and approach. And so you figure he's going to pick someone who kind of fits into that bucket with him. That really is a woman of the people, and you don't get closer to that than being a police chief, and so it was a very fascinating process to watch unfold on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, it was just what it was, but it was.
Yeah, what was it?
It was different.
That's what I want to know.
It was different. Look, there were a lot of conversations that go back to the 2016 cycle about the leadership in the party, and their lack of interest in really kind of stopping from happening what ultimately happened. There were a lot of warning signs. There were a lot of conversations that one could argue were vetting conversations. Because even as a presidential candidate, the party vets these candidates. That you just don't get up and decide to run. And there is, even though you do, there are conversations that if you're not really, and you've seen it already on the Democratic side with how Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been boxed out to the point where he recognizes he's got no place. So I'm going to run as an independent. That'll show him, okay, whatever. So you do have that, and then others the party just ignores because they know at the end of the day there won't be any real traction or challenge there. On the Republican side in 2016, that vetting process stopped. And to this day, I can't tell you why it did. It made no sense to me because there were a lot of warning signs from well-positioned people that you know in Washington at the time, inside the party, who were like, y'all really don't want to do this, do you? And the party, I wasn't chairman at the time, but the party itself, along with a lot of the major political actors, very much as we see happening right now, did not rally behind one candidate to sort of go, okay, we're going to cut off the momentum, we're going to check this. And at various times, that process stopped and didn't continue. And so there are those now who are regretting that. I'm like, well, too late to, about that. But it is fascinating how the two parties operated in this period to position the best candidates in front of the country, and how that background process unfolded.
So I don't want to know who you're voting for, but how many of you, just by a show of hands, are really excited about a Biden-Trump rematch in 2024? Anyone? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, Val, let's talk about the real problem that Joe Biden is now facing. Because any president running for re-election can pivot on some of the issues. You can't pivot on the age. And that in every single poll continues to come up. If you're sitting down with the president...
See the look. I don't have a poker face.
She got that look. She got that look. I'm like, oh, hell,
That's
it's about to
why I'm not
happen.
the vice president. I don't have a poker face.
I'm going to move
okay?
over here.
How do they deal with it?
Well, I think it's interesting, Steve. You know what? You control the things you can control. Whether that's in business or politics or whatever, you control the things you can control. And I think it's interesting that the one thing that this president gets attacked on is the one thing he cannot change or control. Look, I just happen to believe that certain people are born during certain times to do certain things.
Bingo.
We can't control how old we are. We can't control how young we are. The young man who took over my seat in Congress.
Youngest ever.
Is 26 years old.
Frost.
Maxwell Frost.
Yeah.
He was not old enough to serve in Congress when he began his campaign. And guess what a lot of people said? Oh, my God, he can't serve. He's too young. I said, well, maybe he can. Can he do the job? Can he do the job? Because he can't control how old he is, but our main concern should be, can he do the job? And he's been there almost a year, and guess what, y'all? He's doing the job. I think that the president, understanding you control the things you can't control, has to focus very heavily and very seriously on what he's been able to accomplish. And I don't think that we as a party do a good enough job of bragging about that. See, we need to do some bragging. Because we put our heads down and we do the work. That's how I was raised, Michael. My mom was like, you don't talk about what you do, you let other people brag about. Yeah. But this is a moment because the president, look, his age is going to keep coming up. He's got to brag. And those around him, he can't be the only one bragging about the legislation, the historic legislation that others have tried to pass for decades. And with the Inflation Reduction Act, actually lowering the cost of prescription drugs and having the cost of insulin, the most historic investment in clean energy and new energy, and also the infrastructure and jobs bill. We've been talking about infrastructure for decades, and he was finally able to get it done with bipartisan support. And so I really think he needs to continue, he and his team, traveling the nation, visiting places like Erie. He's talking about investing in manufacturing. We do want to see manufacturing come back to places just like Erie, Pennsylvania. I think Joe Biden needs to do what he does best, and that's to come and talk to people about what he's done, and he'll be reelected.
So Michael, let's talk about Donald Trump.
No, let's not. No,
Okay.
no, because
Yeah,
and there's a very good
Donald
reason for
Trump.
that. We will, and I'm happy to do that all day long because that's what I live for. So Val was very eloquent in her answer, and sort of, we can't control the things we can't control, and we can control the things we can't control, and age is one of those things we can't control. I'm going to be a little less eloquent. What the hell is wrong with you people? Do you understand what's at stake here? Do you have... I'm honest to God asking this question seriously. You mean to tell me you're more concerned about an 80-year-old man who's every day trying to find a way to provide a better way for this country out of the morass it's in versus someone, now you can agree or disagree on the policy of that, which I've had this conversation with this team about the stuff I disagree with, okay? I'm fine with that. But the man, I don't have a problem with. I endorsed him in 2020, all right? Why? Because my guy was illiberal, anti-constitutional, anti-America in my view, right? So I had a problem with who my party put up as the nominee. When he tells me that my ancestors come from shithole countries, I had a problem with that. When he tells me that this nation of immigrants, and even though I'm not an immigrant, my family is not an immigrant the way other families are an immigrant, right? But he wants to build a wall to keep them out. I had a problem with that. So I was willing to engage and take that risk for my country because I put my country over my party. I put my country over my party. I put my country over my party. So here we are, after 7.5 years of what you know, 91 indictments later, from what you know, from a president who's a former president who's announced that he wants to be the retribution for his base. What the hell do you think that means if a man tells you he's going to be somebody's retribution against you? Who this week indicated in an interview that when he's president, that he plans to deal with the vermin in this country. Who do you think he's talking about? I know I'm on that list. But when they come after me and they come after you, who's going to be there to talk about the country for you? Who's going to be there to remind people to put country over party? So I have a problem, as a Republican no less, with people who are sitting here picking on Joe Biden because he's 80 years old. Did you watch the State of the Union? How many watched the State of the Union? And what did you see during the State of the Union? You saw that 80-year-old man, punk, the speaker who was sitting behind him, and the Republican caucus, when he negotiated real time, live on television, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid off the table for debt discussion. When he stood there and said, so y'all agree with me, right? And what did the Republicans in that House do who were catcalling and booing him do it before that?
That's right. That's right.
And what was the look on Kevin McCarthy's face sitting behind him? Oh, hell. Folks, my only point is, I get it on the age thing. I get it. I understand it. But you know the guy he's running against is 3 years younger and way more unhealthy than he is. Right? So y'all need to help me understand it. For me, this election is, he's telling you everything he's going to do. He's telling you, I've known Donald Trump a long time. I worked with him before he got into politics. Trust me, he's telling the guy, that's how he operates. He tells you what he's going to do because he doesn't believe you can stop him. That's why he does what he does.
But Michael, let me stay with this, because Donald Trump has rock-solid support within the Republican Party.
He does.
He
I
has
don't get
tapped into that sentiment of the Republicans who feel on trade deals with NAFTA, with NATO, that we have been screwed over the years, and he is the guy that's going to right the ship. So what do you tell Trump supporters?
He's not righting any ship. There's no ship to right. And let's clear the record. This is not just a Republican issue, folks. Can we stop? Can we disabuse ourselves of that lie at least? Because there aren't that many Republicans in the country to have Donald Trump beating Joe Biden in 5 out of 6 battleground states. There aren't that many Republicans. In fact, millions of people have left the Republican Party, become independent, some have become Democrats. This is not a Republican issue. This is a country issue. This is an American people issue. And so the lying about what he's going to do, look, it was infrastructure week every week for 4 years. But Joe Biden got infrastructure done and Republicans agreed and voted for it. Hello? So repeal and replace. I talked about Obamacare. I was on the front end of that war, right? I got the battle scars and we had some victories. But at the end of the day, my party stood up and told all of you, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Trump comes in, we have the House, we have the Senate, and the White House. Did we repeal and replace Obamacare? We couldn't even come up with a plan over 4 years. So what the hell makes you think that Donald Trump is going to come back into office when he's told you that the reason he wants to get back into office is for retribution and to prove that he actually won the 2020 election, that he's going to focus time on bringing jobs to Erie?
There's one more reason he wants to get back in office. One more reason, to stay out of prison.
And it pains me, let me just tell you, as the former national chairman and as a Republican to this day, I'm a Republican because it pisses them off. I know, they want to see me gone. But I was here first. I've been in this party since 1976. I made a choice growing up in Washington, D.C. to become a Republican. Why? Because my mama raised me well. My mama taught me values and principles that aligned for me politically with the party at that time, aligned with its history, which is why I define myself as a Lincoln Republican, because Lincoln was our founder, and that founding was about individual rights and responsibilities. It was always about individualism, always about you, each one of you. That's what the public service part of this is about. And so we've gotten away from that today. And the reality for me at this point is, how do we pull ourselves back? The most powerful words in our founding documents, folks, are we the people. Our founders, as flawed as they were, as difficult as this experiment has been, wrote down words that gave us the power. The power. We're not we the government, we the chief executive, we the Congress, we, the Department of Labor, it's we, the people, in order to form what? A more perfect union, right? Our struggle every day is to make this thing better because it's not perfect. So why are we tripping? Why are we giving up on it? Why are we letting some two-bit reality TV guy tell us that you don't really like your mama and your daddy? Or we're going to build a wall to keep people out. Think about it this way. If the country felt that way in the 1890s, you wouldn't be here. A lot of you would not be here. It is not in our DNA to cut off future generations. That's why your story is so important. And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off and you just got me going, but I'm so frustrated when I hear people sit there and they look at this and they go, yeah, give me more of the last of the thing that we didn't want in 2020. You didn't want it for a reason, so why are you going back to it? And how do you think it's going to be better?
So, by the way, you can ask questions as well. There are index cards moving around. They'll bring them up here, so please write down your questions. We will get to them. Donald Trump is not the nominee. Nikki Haley is the Republican nominee. What would that race look like in 2024?
Oh, baby, that's going to be now. That's a competitive race. Democrats will have a problem. They'll have a real problem. Nikki has a certain appeal. Now, she's, I think, weakened herself with some of the Trumpism that, she's kind of tried to have it both ways at times. But I think her record as a governor of South Carolina, the way she stood on bringing down the Confederate symbols and the flag over the state capitol, those are things that I think she can talk about. I think her honesty on that stage about the $8 trillion of debt that Republicans gave the country, put on the country's back, is something, again, that will open up the narrative in a race. I still think the president, would have a lot to run on. But I think at the end of the day, it will be a much more competitive race. And certainly, if not winning the White House, her being at the top of the ticket will help with a lot of down ballot races for Republicans, which I think otherwise they lose because it will be just a clean sweep. Val can tell you about how that works.
Well, for us, we're going to run hard, Steve, no matter who the Republican nominee is, because there's just too much at stake. And, as Michael stated, I do think that Nikki could give, the president a good run. But she does have some issues in terms of her positions and flip-flopping, right? But we're going to run hard. We cannot, I don't care who's standing on the other side. We need President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris to finish the work that they've started. And they have a very successful track record to run on. My husband says the best indicator of future performance is to look at past performance. And they have something to run on. And back to the age thing, we don't have the luxury of considering a person's age. We don't have that luxury right now. Donald Trump, look what he did when he had to worry about being reelected. Imagine if he gets a second term and does not have to worry about another election. He would destroy this nation as we know it. We cannot allow that to happen.
Michael, let's spend a moment to talk about the border. A couple of years ago, President Bush was here, and he said his biggest regret as a Republican president is he could not get that border issue resolved. Another Republican president, Ronald Reagan, tried. It didn't work. Why has this bedeviled presidents on both sides of the aisle in Congress?
I think for a number of reasons, starting with the fact that we have allowed the ugliest voices amongst us to define the conversation. Going back to what I just said, if America had the attitude on immigration today that we have today, and at the turn of the 20th century, America would look very, very different. There would be a lot of ethnic groups that would not be here, certainly not in the numbers that they are today, because they wouldn't have been allowed in. A wall, rhetorically or otherwise, would have been built to keep them out. So we've allowed these voices to come in and taint the conversation and fill our heads with these lies, outright lies. I mean, I remember in the 2018 cycle, the Trump administration ranting to white suburban women in the northeastern part of the country about the caravan of Mexicans and migrants coming across the border. And I'm like, but they live in Iowa. They live in upstate New York. I mean, they got to worry about Canadians. I don't understand. Why are you caravans? There were no caravans. There were no caravans. In the 2020 cycle, the White House telling again white suburban women, well, you know, they're coming to your neighborhood. Who's they? You know, they're going to bring Section 8 housing to your neighborhood. Oh, you mean black people? Well, as I told my white neighbors, I've been living here amongst you for the last 10 years, so I think we're good, right? I'm already here. What are you worried about? But we've allowed these narratives, Steve, to emerge, narratives that we know aren't true, unless you actually feel that way. Unless that's how you actually feel, and that's what you actually believe, that you want to keep America looking and sounding a certain way. And that is the unfortunate part of the story, that we cut short the opportunities for future generations. And then in the next breath, you know this is true because I know you dealt with it in Congress, everybody's lamenting, well, who's going to pick the oranges? Who's going to do the yard work? I mean, the racism and the xenophobia and all the other things that go into this is just astounding, and that the fact that we allow ourselves to become victims to it is unfortunate. And I think that has fed a lot of these underlying narratives when you've got leadership, not just the president. You've got governors, you've got senators, you've got members of Congress, you've got state legislators, you've got political leadership that's painting this picture of America that most Americans know is not a true picture.
Where's my buddy Ron? If you want to, I want to bring up here. He was there last night, so get up here on the stage for this first question. But go ahead.
Let me just add very quickly too. Look, fear is a great motivator, and do we really believe that with all of the great minds and people that have been elected in the Senate and the House of Representatives, that we cannot fix our border? I think it has become too much of a valuable political football. Fear is a great motivator because Michael, you mentioned earlier, when you have the House and the Senate and the presidency, why haven't you fixed the border? Remembering that we are a nation of laws, yes, but we're also a nation of compassion, and guess what? We're a nation of immigrants. We don't want to fix the border because that would take away this strong political, I heard it in Congress every day, this strong political football that is used to make you afraid of your neighbors so you'll go vote for the other guy.
Let me put another issue on the table because you texted me earlier and you saw the sunset over Presque Isle Bay. National Geographic says it is among the most beautiful in the world, second to Tokyo, Japan. You're dealing with this in Florida. We're dealing with it here. The rising lake levels, global warming, and the threat that we're facing to our climate. How concerned are you about that?
Do you believe in science?
I do.
Okay.
And I believe in you.
Thank you. I would hope that there's no person left in this nation who thinks that climate change is not real. I don't care what you say in your politics. We're certainly seeing it in Florida, more intense hurricanes and storms. The flooding is unbelievable. Sea levels rising. The predictions should be scary. We should be very concerned. And you know, I do a lot of traveling now and talk to colleges and universities, and it is like the #1 concern from those students on the campuses. But there again, this is a problem that we can, I believe, do something about. And the President, again, has made the most historic investment in dealing with climate change in the history of this nation through the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we've got to do something about it. And we have to be very, very seriously concerned because it is a real issue.
Okay, questions from the audience. And where's my 10-year-old? Is he out there? Oh, don't be shy. Come on up here. So he asked a question yesterday. He was the hit of the night. Come on around. And he announced last night that he is running for president. He is 10 years old. It's never too early. 10-year-old for president. Do you think age should be an issue in his campaign, Val?
No. He looks qualified to me.
So, welcome back. You look like you're ready to run for president. So for those who were not there last night, introduce yourself and introduce your family.
I am Cheyenne, and I'm 10 years old. My mom is sitting right there, and I'm really interested in like politics and stuff. I read a lot of books about it, and that's it. And last night I asked a question about the Israeli and Hamas war. Today I asked a question about what will the immigration policy will go if Joe Biden is run for the offices again. If he can make it to the office again, how will the immigration policy will go?
Okay, before they answer, come on over here so your mom can get a picture of you with Val and Michael Steele. Get over there, come on. So you heard it here first. So in Erie, Pennsylvania, in November of 2023, announcing your candidacy in 2060. Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. You look great. So immigration, his question. Tough questioner. Good to be with you again. Thank you.
Immigration. So how does the immigration policy change in a second Biden term? You know, I think there is real value to being a lame duck. You can either allow your office, your term to be consumed by that idea, in which you stop governing, in which you stop trying to push your agenda and move it forward. I just don't get that sense from Joe Biden that would be his approach to his last 4 years in office. I think there would be some degree of, you know, big policy push, and one of those issues I think would be climate, and I think it would be immigration. I think, to your point about President Bush, and I know firsthand from that because I was on the ballot in the 2006 cycle for the U.S. Senate from Maryland, which was a brutal cycle. But the one piece of light was the administration's effort in negotiating a détente, if you will, on immigration. And it was, unfortunately, the hard right within the Republican caucus that scuttled that opportunity, and we have not been able to do it since then. So I think Biden will end the way he began, coming in with a New Deal mindset on some key issues. We saw that play out on COVID. We saw it play out on inflation. We saw it play out, obviously, on infrastructure. And I think you'll see that in a second term on immigration and the environment.
So a lot of quick, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Do we have time or you want to go to?
No, please go ahead.
No, I really do think, too, that, President Biden wants to do big things, and immigration is a big thing. I think working closer to identify the problems in the countries in the first place, I know that's a lot of the work that the Biden administration has focused on, dealing with the humanitarian issues, the abuse, what's causing the migration in the first place, working closer with those countries. Also making sure that we can clearly separate those who are just criminals trying to come across the border from those who are seeking asylum within the United States. So getting more processors and those to really be able to talk to those families that are coming over, fleeing violence. And then we do have to do a greater job securing the border. That does not mean building a wall. I'm not even sure what that means, but better using technology, hiring men and women for our Border Patrol who actually, guess what, likes to work with people regardless of who they are. I think if we continue to do those things, we can make a difference in the at the border and with administration, with immigration. And I see the president in his second term working hard to make an impact.
So this has been a great dinner party. We're at the dessert. So quick questions, quick answers. Should the Electoral College be abolished? Val, we'll begin with you.
Oh, Jesus. No. If you're going to force me into a single answer, quick answer, I'm going to say no. Invite me back and we can talk more about my no.
Michael Steele.
So my answer, because I'm working in this space right now, is a resounding no. And the solution to the Electoral College is the national popular vote. And for those of you who don't know what that is, the national popular vote is a compact amongst the states where the states agree that the winner of the national popular vote gets their Electoral College votes. So right now, we have in our compact, in our national compact, states totaling 205 Electoral College votes. We're working on getting the last 65, and when we do, that presidential election will be the first time your vote, your actual vote for president will count for the election of the President of the United States. So it's a lot of work, and we're excited about it, but you do not need to abolish the Electoral College. The compact is no different than the compact the states have for the lottery, for Powerball. That's a compact. That's an interstate compact among the states that agree that as a Maryland resident who pays into the Powerball to play, that if a Pennsylvanian wins, you get my money. So the state of Maryland won't say, well, a Marylander didn't win, we're not going to put our money in the pot. We're not going to let you take our money out of the pot. We put all our money in the pot, so if a Pennsylvania wins the Powerball, you get the Maryland money. It's the exact same concept for the national popular vote. Maryland's got its 10 electoral votes already in the mix. California's got its 53 or 52 electoral votes already in the mix. So if a Republican wins the popular vote, guess what? They get the electoral votes from the state of California. Even though they may lose the popular vote in the state, they win the popular vote nationally, and they get those 53 electoral votes because they're in the compact.
Jill Stein, RFK Jr., Cornell West, maybe Joe Manchin, maybe your good friend Larry Hogan, third-party presidential politics in 2024. Will a third party win next year? Michael?
No.
No.
Okay. How has gerrymandering affected the Republican Party?
So it's messed it up. It's messed it up big time, but I think you have to understand a little bit the history here and how Republicans initially approached the gerrymandering truth. No one on the Democratic side, with all due respect, complained about gerrymandering when the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives from 1954 to 1994. Not a person claimed anything wrong with that when one party controlled the U.S. House of Representatives for 40 years. Newt Gingrich gets to the House in the late 80s. and commits to a level of guerrilla warfare to change the system. And he wins. And in 1994, Republicans get the House for the first time. Part of that narrative involves what happens at the state legislative races, because guess who draws the line? Not the House of Representatives, but your state legislators. So guess what? You put them in place. You voted them in, and they drew the lines. So what are you complaining about? You don't like it? Change the people who draw the lines. You don't like what happened in the Supreme Court? Right? Change the people who draw the lines. So Republicans focused on that for over 50 years, just as they focused on abortion for over 50 years. And they understood the political system and was ready to play politics with the system. Democrats don't play politics with the system. Some can say that's a good thing, but okay, that's fine. But if one party's going to play politics with the system, guess what? Mitch McConnell's not putting Merrick Garland up for nomination, right? Because he's playing politics with the system. And so that's the offshoot, that's the outgrowth of 40 years in the desert for Republicans. When they got the power, they used it. Democrats don't.
Val, this is for you. Based on the results in last Tuesday's election, how decisive is abortion in 2024?
I think it's extremely decisive. We, the people, and the people have spoken. And look, this is an issue where I think it transcends, it's obvious, it transcends political party. As Republicans talk about less government interference, what could represent more government interference than to not allow a woman to control her own body? And so I just think that, this is going to continue to be an issue. We're working on a referendum in Florida to put it on the ballot, and there are other states. And look, we've seen it pass overwhelmingly in red states, and the people have spoken. So it will continue to be on the ballot.
Michael, this is for you. As a first-time voter who is worried about the future if Trump is elected, what can I do when it seems that the person is out of my control? I think I have that right.
So you always have control in the system, and that's the beauty of our system. To be honest with you, and I can say this from complete knowledge and understanding, our political parties are not designed to let you have that control. How many people in here, by show of hands, believe that the Democrats and Republicans want every registered voter in this country to vote? Right, so there you are, right? But do they want their voters to vote? And if you're not their voter, what does that mean? They don't want you to vote. And so that's the power you have. It is the most powerful gift that our founders gave us, was the right to vote. They understood that power so well that they kept it from blacks and women for a long, long time. And you have it now. Exercise it. Don't believe the hype that because you're 18 or you're 22 that you're somehow checked out of the system. If you've got a part-time job and pay taxes, you're in the system. If you have college or student loan debt, you're in the system. If your parents are on Medicaid or Medicare, you're in the system. You have a vested interest in what happens in your community and what's going on around you. Don't check yourself out because the parties don't want you to check in.
I love this question. So this person's suggestion is a fusion ticket of a Democratic member of the House and a Republican who's won statewide office. What about Demings Steele in 2028?
I'm game if you are.
If we can get through without the vetting process, I'm in.
Well, no, you got to vet him because you're the top of the ticket.
And trust me, that's going to be one hell of a vetting.
Well, the party's going to vet me, right? So.
But a serious question then, would either of you consider running for office again?
If my wife said yes, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
You are a smart man.
Yes, yeah. No, I considered a run for, you know this, Steve and I have been long friends for a long time, and we've talked about this, but I looked very hard at running for governor in 2022. We had an open seat, Larry Hogan, two-term, very successful Republican governor in Maryland, which says something, created this opportunity, but the poison is so ripe now, and I didn't want to put my wife through that and my boys, so I just kind of stood down from it. But yeah, that ambition's there. Look, if you're about public service, as I tell people, I want to be a priest. So this idea of serving others is a real thing for me. It matters to me. And so I try now to find ways to do that. But if the opportunity, regardless of my age, affords itself, yeah, I take a look at it.
Val Demings?
For me, I am not sure if I would run again. I get asked that question every day by people not just in Florida, but from around the country. But I don't know. You know, I just believe that God will send me where I'm most needed to serve. I will continue to serve, just like I am here tonight spending this time with you, but we shall see.
This is a big question, and talking about being the world's policeman or the leader of freedom and human rights, but what is America's role in the world? What should it be? Michael?
It is, I guess it's, for me, it's a very profoundly important role. It's represented by the stars and bars. It's represented by that beautiful lady who stands in New York Harbor with that torch, beckoning to the world to give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. Freedom. Despite how ugly it gets here sometimes, we still manage to show that light of freedom. The fact that we can have these difficult moments and not have a January 6th every day, which makes January 6th stand out so profoundly. And it really should trouble you that we let ourselves go to that point, because African Americans in 400 years never stormed the castle, stormed the Capitol. Women during the suffrage movement never broke a window in the building. You find, and we have found a way to make it work. And so I think that speaks to the rest of the world about the role that we can play. We help nations find a way to make it work, and they know that, and they rely on that. They look to us. I mean, right now, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Israel, what Jimmy Carter did for the peace process back in the 1970s, what Reagan did in defeating communism, Russian communism, that spirit is one that the world looks to in helping them appreciate what we appreciate about freedom.
I was in the Capitol on January 6th. And, you know, as a former police chief who was there to watch the peaceful transfer of power, I could not believe that there were people carrying the American flag, beating police officers down with flagpoles and pipes. I remember when the Sergeant at Arms ran in and told us to get down on the floor to hide because we could hear the glass breaking to the doors of the House floor. And one of my colleagues, and you can imagine the panic with a lot of the staff members and the members of Congress. And one of my colleagues looked at me and she said, "Val, what do you think is going to happen?" I said, "Look, I don't know what is going to happen. But if we all die today," and I meant that, If we are as big and bad as we say we are as a nation, if the Constitution, the rule of law, and our democracy mean anything at all, if we all die today, another group will just come in and certify those electoral ballots declaring Joe Biden as the President of the United States and Kamala Harris as the Vice President of the United States, because the people had spoken. I have the awesome opportunity of traveling in country and out of country right now, and even with, talking to our friends and allies or those who envy us. The world is always watching to see what America is doing. How is America going to do it? How is America dealing with this situation? We are the greatest ambassadors of a democracy, a democratic form of government. And our role in the world is critical. That's why I think the most important question tonight, Steve, is really what's at stake? Everything is at stake, our democracy. And if we don't get it right, if we're out of order, the world is out of order.
I cannot think of a better way to conclude what has been an amazing conversation. Michael Steele, welcome back to Erie. Thank you for being with us. Val Demings, please come back again. Consider running for office. And like I told you, the dinner conversation I had a few months ago, this was even better. We're going to bottle it up, take it on the road again, because if you can make it in Erie, you can make it anywhere. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.